Introducing a sequel better than its predecessor, I give you the Immortal Hitman. Brought to you by my favorite science experiment. Is this thing an aura? Spoiler alert, yes. Yes it is, my friend. Behold the unhealthy amount of generic damage scaling as I arbitrarily socket different spells in my 6-link and remove Shaper's Guardians from existence with no remorse. Want to cosplay as Thor with a machine gun arc? We got that. Want to make an unloved, underappreciated spell do insane damage? We got that. Want to spend hours smashing alteration orbs into medium herald jewels? We got that. If you find yourself asking the question, how much damage? Stop right there because the answer is yes. This build ain't going to explain itself, so let's get into it. To set the pacing for this video, let me preface with this. I'm not going to go in as much depth with the mechanics this build abuses, as I've already explained them somewhat thoroughly in my first video regarding the Immortal Man build, so if you missed that video and want to understand these mechanics, I am glossing over them. Check out the previous video. Starting off, everything in this build hinges on the new Cluster Jewel notables, Purposeful Harbinger, Endbringer, and Heraldry. In order to effectively abuse these nodes, we are stacking Heralds. So with 5 Heralds, Purposeful Harbinger gives us 50% increased effective auras on us, while Endbringer gives us 125% increased damage. And last, we use Heraldry solely for the purpose of getting all the auras and Heralds to fit into the build. On the current tree, we grab 8 Purposeful Harbingers, 6 Endbringers, 2 Heraldries, between the use of 8 Medium Jewels. This gives us 400% increased effective auras on us, 750% increased damage, along with 20% reduced reservation of heralds. With these stats at our fingertips, bosses like the Shaper and Awakener will tremble at the whisper of our name. Now the generic damage and reduced reservation are great and all, but they aren't the true power behind the build. The true power is within the stat that gives increased aura effect of auras on us. You wouldn't believe the plethora of things in-game that can be abused by this stat. Previously, our build had both bad and good aura effects multiplied on us by 5, which made things like the Seer's Death Cloud freeze us, or the paralysis debuff from Delirium
Mission failed. We'll get 'em next time.
Lab freeze us. But in the 9th hour, when our build could murder all the content fearlessly except Delirium or Cirrus in fear of being frozen, GGG decided the build was not broken enough, and removed all our weaknesses. As if Superman himself no longer was susceptible to kryptonite, we have been freed to abuse the game with no downside. Take any aura in the game, now multiply it by 5, because that's the baseline for this build. Oh, what's that? A level 20 Purity of Fire gives 4 max fire resistance, you say? You should get your eyes checked, because it actually says it gives 20 max fire resistance. Throw it in the shopping cart along with the other purities because we're hitting max elemental resistances across the board. Oh, what's that? Haste and Valhaste will collectively give us 235% attack and cast speed? Don't mind if I do. Oh, hello there, Zealotry. Are you going to sweet talk me with that 75% more spell damage and 195% increased crit chance to spells? Let's talk about it over dinner. Oh, what's that behind me? Hatred? You heard about dinner and wants to bring a entree of 125% fizz gained as cold, along with 90% more cold damage? Get this man a chair! Precision, you still hanging out with 3,500 flat accuracy and 290% increased crit chance? Let's make this dinner a dinner party. And while we're at it, we're gonna need some mana sustain for all that speed. Clarity, you can come too. Now I must confess, I just lied to all of you, because those auras don't actually grant those values I just mentioned. We actually have 58% increased aura effect from our skills, which is a stat that acts like a multiplier. So we actually get 58% more than I previously stated. You're welcome. Never fear, the build gets even more broken. I'm going to start out with why Guardian is the best ascendancy currently. Change my mind. This is because the Guardian ascendancy is actually one big aura. You may not realize it at first, but in each of the major nodes we grab, if you look closely underneath the fine print, you'll see the word allies. This is PoE code language for that thing is definitely an aura. In practice, this means Radiant Faith effectively gives us 50% of our mana as flat ES, along with 800% of our life as flat armor. That is the stuff we reserve. So congratulations, you no longer need good ES gear to have a high ES pool. Unwavering Faith makes our 7 auras grant 1% fizz reduction and 0.2% life regen. This is the one portion of the ascendancy that counts as an aura from our skills, as it's adding these to the effects caused by the auras, thus giving us 1% times 5 times 1.58. Same with the 0.2% life regen. With this ascendancy alone and our 90% max fire resistance, we can sustain Righteous Fire for more damage without any percent regen on the tree. Radiant Crusade gives us 50% more damage as well, plus Onslaught, plus 20 all res, so we can go from 240 overcapped res to 260, so that's a good thing. And lastly, Bastion of Hope gives us stun immunity along with 50% block attack and spell block if we've cast and attacked recently. So yeah, I'm a die on the hill where I argue Guardian is the strongest ascendancy in the game currently, and definitively. I haven't even mentioned our gear yet, but I'm sure you can visualize a Templar with no pants standing over Shaper's cold, lifeless body. Let's give him some clothes, because baby, it's cold outside. Except for pants. The man has some good circulation, and we don't want to hide our power level. To start off, we fix our reservation issues by wearing an Alpha's Howl and a Prism Guardian. Alpha's Howl gives us freeze immunity, along with 8% reduced mana reserve, while Prism Guardian allows us to reserve our most expensive auras with our life pool very efficiently. It's mandatory to put our most expensive auras in the shield. Next up, it's the same as the last time for the body armor. Solaris Lorica or Shavron's Wrappings are the choices. It was more of a toss-up before because enemy Chaos Degens did so much damage to us, but GGG removed that danger largely, and we have less mana from our thighs, so Shavron's ES is much more relevant, and a clear choice here. It also is easier to color for most spell setups, but if you still want to show the enemies you mean business, Solaris Lorica is the way to go. It's also probably the budget option. Next up are our rings. For this we generally want to grab high mana int chaos res like last time, with an assassin's mark on hit being the ultimate luxury. This build hits insane cast speed and mana sustain will become a problem. I recommend minus mana cost craft on rare rings if you're using a non-channeling skill. If you're using a channeling skill like Divine Ire, I recommend looking for a Praxis or a good rare ring with the Elrion's mod for minus 8 to total cost of mana skills. For our weapon, based on whatever spell you choose, I generally recommend high mana plus global crit multi plus level of fizz, lightning, cold, or fire spell gem, depending on what spell you're using. Another notable affix would be a wand with the affix that makes auras grant % increased damage. We abuse this stat and get very high damage from it. Now for the items that take this build once again to a whole nother level of broken. Introducing the Flow Untethered, Tailwind Boots, and the World Carver. These items all have one thing in common: action speed. Gotta go fast. Because Tailwind is an aura, so these boots don't give us 10 action speed, but actually give us 50% action speed. Thank you, Deadeye. World Carver, whenever we go to bosses, spamming spells spawns a slipstream. That also gives 10% action speed, which gets multiplied by 5 once again, taking it to another 50% action speed. And lastly, the Flow Untethered grants us 20% action speed every 8 seconds during a 20-second period. So it's roughly 40% of the time, granting us a 100% action speed modifier on us. With all these together, we hit up to 200% action speed and do everything 3 times as fast. Last but certainly not least, the Solstice Vigil. You thought the Headhunter boys got nerfed, but here I am to let the world know they were buffed. Because Shaper's Presence, which makes effects expire 20% slower, is indeed an aura, which gets multiplied by 5. But there is a built-in cap at 75% slower, so it doesn't go to 100% slower expiration. This makes every duration item last 4 times as long. This allows us to almost permanently sustain Valrighteous Fire and Val Haste, as they last longer than the cooldown time of Val Soul Gain Prevention. This item is not mandatory. I believe it will be extremely expensive all league, as every Headhunter player will also be buying these amulets off the market, so I would recommend sticking with Reduced Reservation Amulet with stats like Increased Energy Shield and Global Crit Multi, along with attributes or anything else you might think you need. This will make Reservation easier for fitting all the auras in. Side note, if you are a Headhunter player, literally copying my build and slapping a Headhunter in instead of Flow Untethered will work very well, considering the word on the street is that many Headhunter buffs are also, for some unknown reason, considered an aura. One last thing before we head in game. Let's play a game I like to call Aura or Not Aura. It's like Hot or Not, but with auras. I will be mentioning an item, give you a couple seconds, and then state the answer. For every correct answer, you will claim a brownie point, which is redeemable never. Let's begin. Deadeye Tailwind. Yes, it is an aura. You were paying attention. Congratulations. What about Smite? Boom. Also an aura. You read the gem tag. I'm proud of you. Now let's get a little bit trickier with it. How about something like Blade Storm? Correct again. You got lucky on that one. You guessed. It's not an aura, but I know you guessed. Kingmaker, the rarity effect. Is it an aura? Correct, my friend, it is an aura. Kingmaker, crit multi. Is it an aura? Not an aura. Why, you ask? It's worded the same with the rarity stat? I have no idea. Let's move on. Consecrated ground. Is it an aura? You would be surprised to find out it is, my friend. It gives 30% life regen per second. Makes Purifying Flame fun to play with, that's for sure. Now let's move on. Aspect of the Spider. No, it's not. It's not an aura. It's affecting enemies, not an aura. Doesn't apply to us. Aspect of the Avian. Oh, this applies to us. But no, it's not an aura. Aspect of the Avian while wearing a Sockwall's Nest. That seems like a funny question, considering we just went over Aspect of the Avian. But actually, what's that? It is an aura. Who would have known? Interesting. Champion, inspirational keystone, or not keystone, ascendancy point, specifically regarding the movement speed. Isn't it an aura? Yes, you paid attention when I went over Guardians. Pretty much everything you gotta look for is the allies line. And yes, it is an aura. Next, we're gonna go to Champion Master of Metal, Fizz damage. Is it an aura? Correct, it is an aura. Now we're gonna go to Master of Metal, the armor. Is this an aura? It was a trick question. It's not an aura. Do I know why it's worded the same as the other things? No. You could bet your money I don't know why, but I tested it. Unshattered Will, Harbinger of Focus. Is this an aura? No, it's not an aura, but man would it be broken if it was. Let's move on. Learcast, is it an aura? We're doing easy ones at this point. Yeah, you already know. You already know it's an aura. Come on, let's be real here. A Shrine, is a Shrine buff? Is that an aura? No, it's not. Not an aura. Victario's Flight, the boots that grant movement speed. Is that an aura? Yes, it is, my friend. Death's Oath. Is it an aura? No, it doesn't get any additional bonuses. So, add up your brownie points and show them off to your friends, and they mean nothing. Congratulations. We're going to head in game, and we're going to go over jewels, we're going to go over gems, we're going to go over the passive tree, leveling recommendations, all the good stuff. I'll see you guys in there. Here we are in game. I'm going to go over the gem links, the passive tree, as well as leveling recommendations, and maybe a few other things. So to begin with, gem links. Sixth link, it's kind of really all up to you. It depends. Do you want to do Arc? Do you want to do Divine Ire? Do you want to do Ethereal Knives? All of that stuff is going to vary what gem link support you'll have set up. Currently, I'm messing around with Arc, and I have Controlled Destruction, Arc, Lightning Pen, Spell Echo, Inspiration, and Arcane Surge. A lot of this really depends. For most setups, I'd recommend trying to figure out how to fit in Inspiration support, because mana cost is a serious issue with how fast our cast speed is. But at the end of the day, it's up to you what spell you want to play. No matter what it is, you're going to be deleting bosses. Next up, we have Discipline, we have Herald of Thunder, we have Purity of Ice, we have Precision, we have Purity of Fire, Herald of Purity, Herald of Agony, Clarity, and we have Herald of Ice. These are all just a lot of the auras we have, just socketed in our gear randomly. Nothing too special about it. But then we go to stuff we have linked with blood magic. So those are all of our auras we have in our mana pool. Next up is our blood magic stuff. So to begin with, in the boots, we have blood magic, level 20, linked to Herald of Ash, and Purity of Lightning. So the thing is, with blood magic support, it has a 196% mana multiplier. That means they basically take twice as much to reserve in our mana pool as it does our life pool. So that's why the shield's so important, is because it doesn't have that mana multiplier, and on top of that, it has reduced mana reservation. So we want to do all of our 50% auras in the shield. That's where we have Wrath, that's where we have Zealotry, that's where we have Haste. For spells, I'd always recommend mandatory having Zealotry and Haste, and then if you're doing a cold spell or a fizz spell, you want to do Hatred. If you're doing a lightning spell, you want to do Wrath. If you're doing a fire spell, you probably want to do Anger. Something like along those lines, more or less. Alright. Okay, now that we went over gems, oh, I forgot. And I have Righteous Fire, Val Righteous Fire. Basically, you can just keep this up permanently in game. When you have a high enough ES pool, you'll sustain it for free pretty much. Along with Flame Dash, just use whatever movement skill you want. But I just have Flame Dash and I have a Portal Scroll. So that's just for casting in game. Alright, now that we went over the gems, let's go over the passive tree. So I already mentioned this when I was talking about the Guardian Ascendancy, but basically first things you want to pick up are Radiant Faith, Unwavering Faith. It's basically the stuff that makes you immortal, more or less. Bastion of Hope, getting max block, attack damage, and 50 block spell damage, is also very strong for defense. And then Radiant Crusade is for 50% more damage, and Onslaught. We can maintain Onslaught and that stuff because the Herald of Purity Guardians and the Herald of Agony are counted as allies, which would tag be both the Onslaught line and the one nearby ally line. Next up we have the passive tree. So I'm going to tie this into leveling as well. Last video I got basically a lot of questions about how do I level this character. At the end of the day, if you're looking at this tree, the reality is this tree has so many travel passives, it's not very friendly to leveling at all. These key notables here, the Endbringer, the Purposeful Harbinger, they don't really start giving a bunch of damage to us until we can afford to have a lot of things reserved. And we can't afford to have a lot of things reserved until we have a lot of the reduced mana reserve nodes on the tree. So I more or less would recommend for this build to be somewhat functional, you probably want to level, I want to say somewhere around like at least to like 50 maybe, somewhere in Act 7. I would say is maybe when you can start respecking to this, because you'd start getting a portion of. So as I was saying, obviously a lot of you might not be able to afford the Voices Cluster Jewel. For one, you know, it's already expensive getting all these medium jewels and rolling them to begin with. So if you can't afford that, I would definitely just recommend going for 3 regular large cluster jewels in these instead of the Voices, like as kind of the cheaper option. Going for the Scintillating Idea without Scour method or alting for it, trying to get basically a 2 sockets plus Scintillating Idea and plus hopefully another notable, so Scintillating Idea will be on the travel passive. And then if you can manage to get the Vengeful Commander, that's a good time. So if you do end up going the route where you don't have the 2 Voices, you're going to have an extra, roughly I think 4 plus 2, I think it's an extra 12 passives or so. And your tree is going to end up looking differently because it's going to be looking more defensive, I would say, because it's easier to grab a lot more of the close by defensive nodes. Like you can come over here to Deep Wisdom, Arcane Focus, Arcane Will. That's about 7 passives it looks like, and you'd have 5 more passives on top of that. Really, it's kind of up to you how you spend them, whether or not you go over to get more defenses, or you try to pick up more crit by going over to Throat Seeker, getting all this crit multi here, or possibly even going to Trickery and going to Assassination, along with Soul Siphon or something like that. The reality is, you're not gonna. One, it sucks to lose. You know, go from 400% Purposeful Harbinger increase aura effect on yourself to 300%. Yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer, but you're not losing everything. You're getting something back for it. So, although I don't think it's as optimal, it is still going to be decent, I believe. Now, we covered the passive tree. I think I pretty much showed you how everything works here. I'm going to leave a POB in the description with the passive tree. It's going to have all my gear. It's basically going to be linked straight from my character. Hopefully all that mostly makes sense. If you pull this up in POB though, from my experience, for one, POB currently doesn't support split personality jewels, so that's going to be like, you're going to be like, oh, it doesn't look like you have enough strength for the build. That's because it's not giving me the 43 strength I'm getting from this jewel here. It's only giving me 5 or something like that. Other things you might need to do is you might need to go ahead and allocate these passives yourself in Path of Building. Sometimes when I pull in the cluster jewels, they have everything allocated up to the jewel socket, and then they don't have the actual tree wheels allocated. So you have to manually put those in. Now let's briefly go over what to look for on jewels, and so that you get an idea of what you need to shop for your jewel sockets. To begin with, Watcher's Eye is going to be a big upgrade for the build. You can take advantage of a lot of the Watcher's Eye mods because we are going to be running Haste, we are going to be running Zealotry, we are going to be running a Hatred, Anger, or Wrath, depending on what elemental skill you choose to use, and therefore you can pick up one of these mods pretty easily. I'd recommend looking for something with a Penetration mod is very strong, something with crit chance, something with crit multi, like Anger with crit multi would be strong, Wrath with crit chance is kind of okay, crit multi is definitely better, Precision with crit multi is also very strong. Stuff like that is what you want to look for on a Watcher's Eye. If you can get more than one of those mods together, you're sitting quite nicely. Next up you want to look for is rare jewels with mana, energy shield, cast resistance is good as well. Same kind of as last time, as well as now since we're doing a hit skill with crit, Global crit strike multiplier is very, very important for damage. So you want to look for something that has crit multi plus mana or crit multi plus energy shield. Those are the sorts of damage stuff you want to look for. Conqueror's efficiency with a 1% reduced mana reserved is good for basically making it so you can fit all your auras in. Speaking of which, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but we allocated Champion of the Cause. This was basically, we have every single percent reduced mana reserved on the tree. We've spec'd into every single point of it so far at this point. So that was basically just to help us fit in an extra 50% aura we previously did not have, as well as another Herald, I believe. So we added a decent amount of auras, so we had to get a lot more reduced mana reservation on our tree, as well as our gear. You'll see we're using an Alpha's Hal, and I just unreserved all my things. Whoops. Okay. Anyways, back into the jewels. After the crit multi stuff, still best in slot for farther away jewels are the split personalities. I definitely recommend, for myself, I used one with int strength. This is basically to fix some of my gear needed, like I needed 40 more strength because we're no longer traveling this way. We don't pick up a lot of free strength. We end up traveling this area here, which gives us a ton of free dex, which fixes a lot of the dex requirements, but then we have strength needs, so we pick this up by getting a split personality with like mana strength or int strength is always a good way to go. The last two jewels we went for mana intelligence. Mana intelligence, this is pretty much the best route you can go for getting higher ES numbers, more or less, but if you can't afford those, it's not the end of the world. You can still make the build work on something with crit multi, something with ES, mana. Those are the stats you want to look for. If you're doing a spell that needs a threshold jewel, there's multiple places you can socket them. But here's just an example of if you want to do EK, that's where you socket your EK jewel. And the other thing with Threshold Jewel is it's a cheaper way to get something like Corrupted Blood or 1% reduced mana reserved. Those are a kind of a steal for the most part if you can find things selling those implicits. So I would recommend that based on whatever spell you're doing. If it's Frostbolt, you need the Frostbolt Threshold Jewel, Freezing Pulse Threshold Jewel, etc., etc. You know what I mean. I think that pretty much clears it up for the tree. We talked about jewels. I'm going to briefly go over the versatility of this. So you'll notice in the beginning of the video I was basically doing like 20 different spells, I think is how many I ended up doing, or 21. I can't remember how many different spells I did, but I didn't change any of my gear other than recoloring my shavs a couple times to get some different links for my lightning spells, my cold spells, my fizz spells, my fire spells. So the only thing I ever changed were the color of my shavs, and I changed wrath for hatred or anger depending on if I was doing a cold spell or a fire spell or a lightning spell. I didn't even change my wand. So the fizz spells had an advantage because my wand was a +1 fizz spell, but what you basically saw for the other stuff was you saw a guy with a 100 mana wand with crit multi and 50 crit chance. Okay, that's a pretty atrociously bad weapon if you ask me. So definitely specialize your wand based on the type of damage you're doing or the type of spell you want to use, and you're gonna go places. Also, I'd recommend for flasks. I didn't think I actually went over these, but you want a diamond flask. That's a good way to go. Aziri's Promise is also another good damage option. It gives you chaos res as well. Those are both good things. Wise Oak is pretty good for damage because we don't pick up a lot of penetration on tree, so it's a huge damage support. One thing you just got to make sure is, oh, I screwed up all my auras and stuff since I unreserved everything. But more or less, I used to have my highest resistance was lightning because I'm doing arc. Basically, I switched around this ring. When I wanted to do a lightning spell, I just put on my lightning resist on this ring, and then since I don't really have any other resist around the gear for the most part, I was able to get my lightning res just a little bit higher than the others, and therefore I was penetrating lightning resistance. If I wanted to switch to a cold spell, I would just switch this to cold resistance, or if I wanted to do a fire spell, fire resistance, and then I could basically keep switching between what Wise Oak thing I was using, or what spell I was using. It was very easy to swap between them and have fun with different spells. This build's great for that because it is kind of a lot of fun to be able to swap a spell in, have a completely different feeling build, but still be able to completely obliterate the end game. Last thing I would say, I used a mana flask for sustaining my extremely high cast speed. Depending on how high you can get your clarity level, you might not end up needing a mana flask, in which case something like a Bottled Faith would be a very strong end game option for you. That's kind of the gist on the flasks, as well as I was just going over the versatility of the build, how you can basically make anything work, have fun with a bunch of different spells, and really just enjoy playing Path of Exile. I hope you guys, I hope I was did a decent or a better job at explaining a lot of the things I'm using here. If I didn't go over well, like the mechanics of how to roll these jewels or stuff like that, I covered that stuff more in depth on the previous video. But it's pretty much, for rolling the medium jewels, you need the Herald, and you need to have 4 or 5 passives, and you ult plus Regal Scour these until you can get basically Endbringer plus Purposeful Harbinger plus a Jewel Socket, or Purposeful Harbinger plus Heraldry plus a Jewel Socket. And along with the large jewels, if you're crafting these, I recommend Alch Scour method. That's basically how you craft the jewels. I'm trying to think if there's any more in-depth concepts I haven't covered. If you didn't see my other video, and it seems like I kind of glossed over something, there's a good chance I covered it more in depth in my first video. So I hope you guys enjoy the build. I hope you have a lot of fun playing a lot of different spells, being able to crush the game no matter what you're doing, or get to take a skill you previously were like, I'm never going to be able to play this skill in endgame again, and make it work. You know, do something fun. Maybe kill a boss with Lightning Warp. I thought that was pretty fun when I did it for the 2 seconds I killed Phoenix in it. So I hope you guys enjoy it. If you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe, hang out. I'm going to keep trying to make cool and interesting builds, and hopefully continue to push the envelope of what's really possible when you're making characters in Path of Exile.
Mission failed. We'll get 'em next time. Mission failed. We'll get 'em next time. Mission failed. We'll get 'em next time.